Imagine a divided Japan, where powerful families battle for control of the imperial throne. In 1185, an epic battle in the Strait of Dan-no-ura decided the fate of an entire nation. But what happened next? How did Japan transform from an empire ruled by emperors into a military regime led by shoguns? The answer lies in the rise of the Kamakura Shogunate, one of the most fascinating chapters in Japanese feudal history. Feudal Japan didn't appear out of nowhere. It was shaped by centuries of conflicts, alliances, and political strategies. In the 12th century, imperial power began to weaken, and the samurai, once merely warriors, became the true rulers. This video will take you on a journey through the birth of the Kamakura Shogunate, Japan's first military government, and show how it forever changed the country's history. Did you know that before the shogunate was established, the emperor was considered divine? Yet even gods can lose their grip on power. When the central authority collapsed, local warlords seized their opportunity, setting the stage for one of history's most dramatic power shifts. The story of the Kamakura Shogunate is also a tale of betrayal, honor, and the rise of the warrior class. While European knights were fighting in the Crusades, Japan's samurai were creating a unique social order that would last for nearly 7 centuries. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of great empires, like this video, subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we explore how a battlefield victory transformed into one of history's most enduring military governments, and discover how the echoes of that transformation still resonate in Japanese culture today. Picture Japan in the centuries before the Kamakura Shogunate, a land where emperors ruled from their grand palaces, considered divine descendants of the sun goddess Amaterasu. But appearances can be deceiving. Though emperors sat on the chrysanthemum throne, the real power often lay elsewhere. For generations, the mighty Fujiwara family pulled the strings from behind the scenes. These master politicians didn't need to wear the crown to control the empire. They intermarried with the imperial family, placed their daughters as imperial consorts, and eventually became the power behind the throne. The emperors became little more than figureheads, performing religious ceremonies while the Fujiwara made the real decisions. But no dominance lasts forever. By the 12th century, cracks began to appear in this centralized system. The imperial court in Kyoto, once the undisputed center of Japanese governance, watched helplessly as its influence crumbled at the edges of the realm. In distant provinces, local clans carved out their own territories, paying lip service to the emperor while essentially ruling as independent lords. This fragmentation created the perfect opportunity for a new class to rise: the samurai. These weren't just skilled warriors with sharp swords and impressive armor. They were loyal retainers to provincial lords, managing their lands and fighting their battles. As central authority weakened, these samurai became increasingly indispensable. They collected taxes, maintained order, and defended their master's interests with unmatched martial prowess. Think about it. While aristocrats in Kyoto practiced their poetry and court etiquette, these battle-hardened warriors were dealing with the harsh realities of provincial life. Is it any wonder they eventually took control? As provincial clans grew stronger, 2 rose above the rest: the Taira and the Minamoto. These powerful warrior clans would eventually clash in an epic struggle that would change Japan forever and lay the groundwork for the shogunate system. Here's something fascinating. The word shogun literally means generalissimo, or commander-in-chief of the armed forces. But this military title drastically undersells what the shogun actually became. Far from just a military leader, the shogun emerged as Japan's true ruler, wielding absolute political power while allowing the emperor to remain as a sacred symbol. It was a brilliant political arrangement. The emperor provided divine legitimacy, while the shogun exercised real authority. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It took generations of power struggles, battlefield victories, and political maneuvering. But when the dust settled, Japan had fundamentally changed. The elegant aristocrats of the Heian period gave way to practical warriors who valued loyalty, discipline, and military skill above poetry and courtly refinements. The stage was set for Minamoto no Yoritomo to claim the title of shogun and establish the Kamakura Shogunate, Japan's first warrior government. A new era had begun, one where the sword would hold more sway than the imperial scepter for centuries to come. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic power struggles in Japanese history. As imperial authority continued to weaken, two mighty warrior clans stepped into the spotlight: the Taira and the Minamoto. Their rivalry would erupt into a full-scale civil war that the Japanese call the Genpei War, a 5-year conflict from 1180 to 1185 that would forever change the political landscape of Japan. The Taira clan, also known as the Heike, had already secured tremendous influence. Led by Taira no Kiyomori, they had managed something unprecedented. They had placed their own family member on the imperial throne. Imagine the audacity. No longer content with merely influencing emperors, Kiyomori made his grandson, the Emperor Antoku. The Taira's crimson banners flew proudly across the capital as they dominated court politics with an iron grip. But the Minamoto clan, bearing white banners and nursing deep grudges, wasn't about to let their rivals rule unchallenged. Though previously defeated and scattered, the Minamoto found new leadership in a brilliant strategist, Minamoto no Yoritomo. Unlike many warriors of his time who sought glory on the battlefield, Yoritomo was calculating and patient. From his base in the eastern provinces, he began rallying allies, building a coalition against the Taira dominance. What followed was a series of brutal battles across Japan. Cities burned, warriors fell, and the countryside was ravaged by conflict. The tide began to turn against the Taira when Yoritomo's younger brother, the legendary warrior Minamoto no Yoshitsune, emerged as a brilliant military commander. His tactical genius would prove decisive in the coming confrontations. Fascinating to think about, this conflict has captured the Japanese imagination for centuries. The epic tale, The Tale of the Heike, recounts these battles with such emotion that it became one of Japan's most beloved works of literature, often performed by blind musicians who memorized its thousands of lines. After years of fighting, everything came down to a final decisive confrontation at Dan-no-ura in April of 1185. This wasn't just any battle. It was a naval engagement in the narrow Shimonoseki Strait between the main island of Honshu and Kyushu. The Taira had retreated to their naval strongholds, where they believed their superior seafaring skills would give them the advantage. The battle began with the Taira in a favorable position. They knew the tides of the strait and positioned their ships accordingly. For the first phase of the battle, they seemed to have the upper hand. The young Emperor Antoku, just 7 years old, was aboard the Taira flagship, along with the sacred imperial regalia, the sword, mirror, and jewel that legitimized imperial rule. But then the tide literally turned. As the water's flow reversed, the Minamoto forces gained the advantage. Adding to the Taira's troubles, a crucial ally, Taguchi Shigeyoshi, defected in the middle of the battle and revealed to the Minamoto which ship carried the emperor. The fighting was fierce and desperate. Samurai in heavy armor fired arrows, grappled between ships, and engaged in hand-to-hand combat on heaving decks. As the Minamoto gained the upper hand, the Taira faced complete destruction. Rather than surrender, many chose a dramatic end. The grandmother of Emperor Antoku, Lady Ni, took the young emperor in her arms and jumped into the sea, taking the sacred sword and jewel with them. Taira warriors by the hundreds followed suit, preferring death to the shame of defeat. The sea, once blue, turned red with the blood of the fallen, and white with the fluttering battle fans of drowning warriors. The imperial sword was lost forever to the depths, though legends say the jewel was recovered. The mirror remained on land and survived. With this decisive victory, Minamoto no Yoritomo became the most powerful man in Japan. Though he hadn't personally fought at Dan-no-ura, he had entrusted the battle to his brother Yoshitsune. Yoritomo reaped the political rewards. Ironically, he would later turn against this same brother, fearing his popularity and military prowess. The Battle of Dan-no-ura didn't just end a war, it ushered in a new era of Japanese history. The old order had literally drowned in the Shimonoseki Strait, and from its depths would rise the first shogunate, with Yoritomo at its helm. Japan would never be the same again. With the Taira clan vanquished and the Minamoto triumphant, Yoritomo stood as the undisputed victor. But he wasn't satisfied with merely winning a war. He intended to reshape Japan itself. What happened next was nothing short of revolutionary. In 1192, 7 years after the decisive Battle of Dan-no-ura, Minamoto no Yoritomo received what appeared to be the highest honor, the title of Sei Taishogun, Commander-in-Chief of the expeditionary force against the barbarians, bestowed by Emperor Go-Toba himself. On paper, this made Yoritomo simply the emperor's military deputy. But make no mistake, this was no mere military appointment. Here's what made Yoritomo's approach so brilliant. Rather than deposing the emperor or claiming the throne for himself, he created an entirely new power structure alongside the existing imperial system. The emperor would continue to reign in Kyoto, maintaining the illusion of supreme authority, performing religious ceremonies, and serving as a symbol of Japanese cultural continuity. But the shogun would rule, and Yoritomo made a strategic decision that spoke volumes about his intentions. Instead of establishing his government in Kyoto, where he might be influenced by court politics and imperial traditions, he built his power base in Kamakura, a small fishing village nearly 300 miles to the east. Imagine that, the actual ruler of Japan deliberately choosing to govern far from the imperial capital. This physical separation was a clear statement. The shogunate would be a military government distinct from the aristocratic traditions of the imperial court. Kamakura was no random choice. Nestled between mountains and facing the sea, it was naturally defensible, close to Yoritomo's power base in eastern Japan, and importantly, removed from the political intrigue of Kyoto. From this modest town, a new form of government emerged that would define Japan for centuries to come. The Kamakura Shogunate introduced something revolutionary, a dual governance system. While the imperial court continued its ceremonies and maintained the cultural traditions, the shogunate handled the practical matters of administration, taxation, and military affairs. Yoritomo established the samurai as the new ruling class, replacing the old aristocracy with warriors who valued martial skill, loyalty, and discipline above courtly refinements. Here's something fascinating that people often don't realize. Yoritomo was actually a brilliant administrator, not just a military leader. He created Japan's first military government by establishing the bakufu, literally tent government, referring to the military headquarters that would become the true center of Japanese political power. He implemented a complex system of land stewards and protectors throughout the provinces, binding powerful local lords to him through oaths of loyalty. Did you know that Yoritomo was so concerned about potential rivals that he even turned against his own brother, the brilliant general Yoshitsune, who had won so many battles for him? Despite sharing the same blood and fighting for the same cause, Yoritomo couldn't tolerate any threat to his authority. Yoshitsune was eventually forced to flee and later died in exile, a tragic end for one of Japan's most celebrated military heroes. The Kamakura Shogunate would last for more than 150 years, through multiple generations of leaders, establishing a precedent that would endure for nearly 7 centuries until the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century. Even after Yoritomo's unexpected death in 1199 from a horse-riding accident, the system he created proved remarkably durable. Isn't it incredible to think that by choosing to rule from the shadows rather than claiming the throne directly, Yoritomo created a system of government that would last far longer than if he had simply declared himself emperor? By now, you probably realize that the shogun was the true ruler of Japan, while the emperor remained a symbolic figure, legitimizing the shogun's rule but exercising very little actual power. Looking back at this pivotal moment in Japanese history, one can't help but wonder, how different might Japan have developed if the emperors had maintained real political power rather than becoming ceremonial figures? Would the samurai class have risen to such prominence? Would Japan have developed its unique feudal system that shaped everything from its art to its philosophy? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The Kamakura Shogunate wasn't just a changing of the guard. It represented a complete reimagining of how Japan would be governed. Yoritomo didn't simply defeat his enemies, he engineered an entirely new social and political order that would define Japanese society for centuries to come. At its heart, the Kamakura Shogunate was a feudal system built on a foundation of personal loyalty and military service. Picture a pyramid of power with the shogun at the top, supported by layers of warriors bound to him through solemn oaths and mutual obligation. This wasn't just government. This was a complete restructuring of Japanese society. The genius of Yoritomo's system was how it addressed a fundamental problem. How could one man control a vast nation of scattered provinces and powerful local warlords? His solution was elegant and effective, the creation of a warrior aristocracy with a vested interest in maintaining the shogun's authority. Land became the currency of power in this new Japan. The shogun granted estates called shuin to his most loyal followers. In return, these warriors pledged their swords, their service, and their very lives to the shogun. These high-ranking samurai, known as gokenin, or housemen, became the backbone of the shogunate's power. They, in turn, subdivided their lands among their own followers, creating layers of loyalty that extended throughout the country. Think about how revolutionary this was. Previously, land ownership had been tied to court rank and imperial favor. Now, military skill and loyalty to the shogun determined who controlled Japan's resources. This transformation elevated the samurai from mere warriors to Japan's ruling class, a position they would maintain for the next 7 centuries. To administer this new system, Yoritomo established 2 key offices that formed the backbone of shogunal authority. The jito, or land stewards, managed agricultural estates and collected taxes, ensuring the shogunate received its due from the provinces. The shugo, or military governors, maintained order in the provinces and could mobilize troops when needed. These officials represented the shogun's authority throughout Japan, creating a network of control that extended from Kamakura to the farthest corners of the realm. But perhaps Yoritomo's most innovative contribution was the creation of Japan's first military legal system. He established the Monchujo, a board of inquiry that heard land disputes among his vassals, and the Samurai Dokoro, or Samurai Bureau, which handled disciplinary matters among the warrior class. For the first time, Japan had a legal system independent from the imperial court, designed specifically to address the needs and conflicts of the warrior class. Here's something fascinating. These courts operated on principles completely different from the imperial courts in Kyoto. Imperial justice had been based on complex court precedents and Chinese-inspired legal codes. The shogunal courts, by contrast, valued direct testimony, common sense, and military values like loyalty and honor. Justice became more practical and less theoretical, perfectly suited for a society now dominated by warriors rather than aristocrats. The system was so effective that even after Yoritomo's death, when real power fell to the Hojo family, who ruled as regents for the shoguns, The basic structure he created remained intact. The institutions proved stronger than any individual. One particularly interesting aspect of the Kamakura legal system was how it handled evidence. Unlike European courts of the same period, which might use ordeals or torture to determine guilt, Kamakura courts relied heavily on written documents and sworn testimony. Land disputes were settled by examining deeds and records, showing a surprisingly sophisticated approach to justice for the 12th and 13th centuries. This complex web of feudal relationships, administrative offices, and legal institutions transformed Japan from a centralized state modeled on Tang Dynasty China into something uniquely Japanese, a feudal society where power flowed from personal bonds between warriors rather than from imperial edicts or aristocratic birthright. The samurai values of loyalty, honor, and martial prowess became the defining characteristics of Japanese culture, influencing everything from art and literature to religion and philosophy. The structure Yoritomo created proved remarkably durable. Even when challenged by imperial attempts to restore power, like the Jokyu War of 1221, the shogunate emerged victorious, demonstrating that in this new Japan, the sword had truly become mightier than the scepter. The Kamakura Shogunate may have fallen in 1333, but its impact on Japan was just beginning. What Minamoto no Yoritomo started would echo through Japanese history for nearly 700 years. When we look at medieval and early modern Japan, we're essentially looking at the world that Kamakura built. Think about this for a moment. The template created by Yoritomo was so successful that Japan would be ruled by military governments from the late 12th century until the late 19th century. That's longer than the United States has existed. When the Kamakura Shogunate finally collapsed under the weight of financial troubles and imperial challenge, it wasn't replaced by a return to imperial rule. Instead, another warrior clan, the Ashikaga, simply adopted the shogunal system for themselves, establishing what historians call the Muromachi shogunate. Later, after a century of civil war known as the Sengoku period, or Age of Warring States, Japan would once again be unified under a shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunate, established in 1600, would rule Japan for over 2.5 centuries, maintaining the same fundamental principles established by Yoritomo all those years before: military authority, samurai rule, and a figurehead emperor. So what made the Kamakura model so enduring? One key aspect was its pragmatism. Unlike the imperial court with its elaborate ceremonies and rigid traditions, the shogunate was built to solve practical problems. It administered justice, collected taxes, defended against threats, and maintained order. The shogunate wasn't concerned with the poetry competitions and aesthetic pursuits that occupied the imperial court. It focused on effective governance. The greatest legacy of Kamakura was undoubtedly the elevation of the samurai class. Before Yoritomo, samurai were essentially just warriors, skilled fighters who served noble houses. After Kamakura, they became Japan's ruling class, its aristocracy, its political elite. This transformation was so complete that by the Edo period, centuries later, a rigid four-tier class system had developed with samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. Here's something fascinating. The values associated with the samurai became the values of Japan itself. The warrior code of bushido, with its emphasis on loyalty, honor, courage, and self-discipline, became the ethical foundation of Japanese society. Even today, modern Japanese culture bears the imprint of samurai values: the importance of loyalty to one's company, the emphasis on self-discipline and perseverance, the concept of saving face. These can all be traced back to the samurai culture that flourished under the shogunates. The Kamakura period also saw significant cultural and religious developments. During this time, Buddhism underwent a profound transformation in Japan. New sects emerged that simplified Buddhist teachings and made them accessible to warriors and common people alike. Zen Buddhism, with its emphasis on discipline, direct experience, and meditation, particularly appealed to the samurai class and would go on to influence Japanese aesthetics, from garden design to the tea ceremony. Did you know that the Kamakura Shogunate also oversaw one of Japan's most remarkable military achievements? In 1274 and again in 1281, the Mongol Empire under Kublai Khan launched massive invasions of Japan. These were the same Mongols who had conquered China, Central Asia, and parts of Eastern Europe, a seemingly unstoppable force. Yet the samurai of Kamakura, Japan, rallying to defend their homeland, managed to repel both invasions, aided by fortuitous typhoons that the Japanese called kamikaze, or divine winds. This victory further strengthened the samurai's position in society and their belief in Japan's divine protection. The architectural legacy of Kamakura remains visible today. The Great Buddha of Kamakura, a massive bronze statue over 40 feet tall, was cast during this period and still sits in meditation, having survived earthquakes, tsunamis, and the passage of centuries. Imposing Zen temples with their distinctive style reflect the military values of simplicity and strength that defined the era. Even Japan's famous castle towns, though built later, evolved from the administrative centers established during the Kamakura period. The pattern of urban development around a military headquarters became the template for Japanese urban planning for centuries. When the Meiji Restoration finally ended shogunal rule in 1868, it brought to a close a system of government that had begun almost 700 years earlier with Yoritomo's revolutionary creation. The emperor was restored to power, the samurai class was disbanded, and Japan embarked on a rapid modernization program. Yet even as Japan transformed itself into a modern nation-state, the cultural, social, and psychological legacies of the shogunate, which had all begun with Kamakura, continued to shape Japanese identity. In many ways, the story of the Kamakura shogunate is the story of Japan itself, a tale of pragmatic adaptation, resilience, and the blending of power and culture into something uniquely Japanese. As we've journeyed through the rise of the Kamakura shogunate, we've witnessed one of history's most profound transformations, a complete reimagining of how a nation could be governed. The ascension of the Kamakura shogunate wasn't merely a change in leadership. It was a pivotal moment that would define Japan's trajectory for the next 7 centuries. Think about it. A single battle at Dan-no-ura in 1185 shifted the entire course of Japanese history. The waves that crashed against the warring ships that day carried away not just the Taira clan, but an entire system of government. From those same waters emerged a new Japan, one ruled by warriors rather than aristocrats, by practical military men rather than court nobles. What's truly remarkable is how completely this transformation took hold. The feudal system established by Minamoto no Yoritomo proved so effective, so adaptable, that it would endure in various forms until the 19th century. The samurai values, loyalty, honor, discipline, and martial prowess became woven into the very fabric of Japanese identity. History often turns on such moments, battles that could have gone either way, decisions that seemed minor at the time but proved monumental in retrospect. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if the Taira had emerged victorious at Dan-no-ura? What if the imperial system had been reinforced rather than relegated to symbolic status? What if Japan had continued along the Chinese model of centralized imperial rule rather than developing its unique feudal system? Perhaps the Taira would have established their own form of military government, but one more closely tied to the imperial court. Perhaps Japan would have developed a different class structure, one that continued to prioritize aristocratic lineage over martial skill. The distinctive samurai culture might never have flourished, and Japanese aesthetics, from garden design to swordsmithing to castle architecture, might have evolved along entirely different lines. Or consider this fascinating possibility. What if neither the Taira nor the Minamoto had gained decisive victory? Japan might have fractured into regional powers much earlier, similar to the later Sengoku period, but without the unifying memory of shogunal rule. Would Japan have been more vulnerable to outside influence or invasion? Would the Mongols have succeeded in their attempts to conquer the Japanese islands without a unified samurai resistance? These questions are impossible to answer definitively, but they remind us that history isn't inevitable. The Japan we know today, with its unique blend of tradition and innovation, its distinctive cultural heritage, emerged from choices made and battles won centuries ago. The story of the Kamakura Shogunate teaches us that political systems aren't merely about who holds power, but how that power is structured, legitimized, and exercised. Yoritomo's genius wasn't just in defeating his enemies, but in creating a system of government that could outlast him, one that balanced practical military control with symbolic imperial authority. As we close this chapter of Japanese history, I hope you've gained not just knowledge about the past, but insight into how political transformations shape societies for generations to come. The echoes of Kamakura can still be heard in modern Japan, in its corporate hierarchies, its cultural values, and its architectural heritage. If you enjoyed this journey through feudal Japan, be sure to hit that like button and share this video with friends who appreciate history's pivotal moments. Subscribe to the Medieval Archives for more deep dives into the medieval world across different civilizations. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How do you think Japan might have developed differently if the imperial system had remained dominant? Leave your theories in the comments below. Join us next time as we explore another fascinating chapter from the medieval world. Until then, this is the Medieval Archives, where the past comes alive. See you in our next historical adventure.